All right, today we are jumping into a really provocative piece of writing that pulls absolutely no punches when it comes to modern dating. It's from a work called The Marketplace of Attraction, and its main idea, well, it's designed to make you think, and maybe get a little uncomfortable.
Wow. Okay, so right out of the gate, the source hits us with this. It's a blunt, almost jarring statement that boils down human connection to a simple, kind of crude transaction. And this is the core idea we're going to unpack today.
So, what's your first reaction to that? Does it feel like just an offensive generalization? Or is that a tiny kernel of uncomfortable truth in there that maybe we just don't like to admit? The source argues that to really get it, we have to look past our feelings and start looking at the patterns of how people actually behave.
And that brings us to the author's whole argument. This isn't about making a moral judgment. It's not about what's right or what's wrong. It's just about breaking down the patterns that we can see happening all around us in the dating world.
And this is a really key point. The source says, hey, let's not look at this through the lens of modern right and wrong. Instead, it wants us to look through the much older, much more primal lens of biology. The argument is that our attractions are hardwired by instincts that we don't even consciously control.
So how exactly does biology fit into all of this? Well, according to the source, it all comes down to these really powerful instinctual drives that are a little different for men and for women, and this is what helps break down that initial, controversial quote.
The source maps this out pretty clearly. For men, the argument goes, the primary filter is visual. Things like health, youth, symmetry. Our brains subconsciously read those as signs of fertility. For women, the filter is geared more towards security. Cues like resources, status, and ambition are seen as signs that a man can provide and protect.
And to really hammer this point home on the male side, the source points to data showing a pretty staggering 80% of men rate physical appearance as very important. Now, this doesn't mean personality is irrelevant, not at all, but it highlights what the source calls the first filter of attraction.
Then on the other side of the coin, you have this quote from the text. It shows how modern symbols of resources, like a nice car, can tap right into those ancient security instincts. I mean, it's the exact same guy, but just by changing the context to show success, it apparently changes how attractive he's perceived to be.
So all of this is building towards the source's central metaphor, the marketplace. The argument is that whether we like it or not, modern dating basically functions like an economy, where everyone is sort of trading on their perceived value.
This table kind of lays out that whole framework. In this model, men bring assets like resources and status to the table, and women, in this same model, bring assets like beauty and fertility. It's a very transactional way of looking at things, but the author argues it's the reality humming just beneath the surface.
And this is where things get, well, kind of brutal, especially in the digital age. The source claims that on dating apps, the top 20% of men, the ones with the highest status and attractiveness, get something like 80% of the female attention. It creates this incredibly competitive and pretty unequal environment.
But you know, things get even more complicated when we factor in what society thinks about all this. The source then dives into the double standards that we apply to these exact same principles of attraction.
And man, the contrast here is pretty wild when you see it laid out. The source points out that a man wanting a beautiful woman is totally accepted. I mean, we have entire industries built on it. But a woman wanting a man with resources and security, she's often shamed, told money doesn't matter, or just labeled a gold digger. It's a huge double standard.
Now you're probably thinking, hey, this isn't true for everyone, and you're right. The source totally acknowledges that. Of course there are men who value intelligence over looks, women who are the primary breadwinners, and tons of people who fall in love for deep, meaningful reasons. But the argument here is that the exceptions don't invalidate the overall pattern. The skydiving analogy it uses is pretty sharp. Just because a few people survive a fall without a parachute doesn't mean parachutes aren't critical for survival.
Okay, so if we accept this framework of biology and marketplace dynamics, even just for a minute, what are you supposed to do with that information? Well, the source suggests you're basically left with two choices. It's your move.
And here they are, the two paths. The first one is to play the game. Basically, you accept the rules as they are and you work to maximize your own value within that system. The second path, change the game. This means you consciously opt out of that superficial market and go looking for something deeper.
So let's talk about path number one, playing the game. According to the source, this is the practical route, even if it's kind of exhausting. For men, it means focus on your income, your fitness, your confidence. For women,
It means focus on maximizing physical attractiveness and embracing your femininity.
And then you have the total opposite approach, changing the game. This is positioned as the more idealistic path. It's all about deciding the marketplace metrics aren't for you, and instead you focus on things like character, shared values, and real compatibility, building a connection from the ground up, not from the top down.
Okay, so as we start to tie all of this together, the source begins to move beyond that simple, kind of harsh transaction it started with. It starts looking for a more complete, more nuanced truth about what's really going on.
And this is the big reveal, right? The source finally says that initial idea, money and beauty, it's really just a simplification. They're just the most visible, the most easily measured stand-ins for a much deeper, more complex set of needs and desires.
Which brings us to what the source calls the more complete picture. The idea is that men aren't just looking for beauty. They're looking for a combination of beauty, femininity, peace, and respect. And women aren't just looking for resources, but a mix of resources, protection, status, and genuine connection.
So in the end, the author's big takeaway is this. The most successful, most fulfilling relationships don't really choose one path or the other. They manage to integrate both. That initial, maybe transactional attraction, yeah, looks and money, that's what gets your foot in the door. But it's the deeper stuff, the love, the respect, the connection, that's what makes a relationship last.
So I guess that leaves us with the big question to think about. Based on everything the source lays out, is love fundamentally a transaction based on value? Is it a transcendent connection that just ignores all that superficial stuff? Or is it a delicate and maybe even necessary dance between the two?